Hey, so in this video, I'm just going to be talking about Alice Cooper's 1980 album, Flush the Fashion. So let's really talk about, and it's kind of like, how did we get from his previous album, From the Inside, to this? So let's really talk about, and before, about Alice, in the late '70s, like why was the drastic change in character and all that? So, in the '70s, this was his last album in the '70s, 1978. This is from the Inside. It's kind of like a concept album of his time in the hospital recovering from alcoholism. Really good album, and I really love the cover with the close up of Alice's face with the makeup and everything, and then you see like inside the eye, you see the characters from the album and stuff. So it's a really good. This is a really good album. But as we approach, the new decade, 1980, Alice went through this entire change in persona, character, music, and they're always curious, like why the change in the music. So this really began like Flush the Fashion. Kind of was the beginning of what is known now as Alice's blackout albums. Albums that he doesn't remember recording or going on tour, and at the time he was heavily influenced with alcohol again, and then he started using dabbing into cocaine, so that really put his mindset not in the best mindset, I guess, during that time period. So and I was like thinking about they were saying like how the music industry was changing as they approached 1980, and so a lot of songs, you look at a lot of rock bands at the time in the '70s, rock bands like Aerosmith and Kiss, were when it came to the new decade of the '80s, they were kind of trying to, their albums weren't selling well, and they were trying to adapt to the new sound. You got to understand, this is before MTV. This is about 2 years before MTV was launched. So as a rock band, there's no social media. There's nothing like that back then. So really, to advertise your albums and your songs, you have to be on the radio. So if radio stations are not playing your songs, then nobody's gonna even know that you have a new album out, really. So and that's like the whole thing. You always want to have your stuff in like the record stores, constantly. That's why every like band would produce albums, every year. Will come up with, maybe like in a year, two albums a year, in order to make sure that their stuff was fully stocked in record stores. So stuff was not selling. Even look at Kiss. In early '80s albums, Unmasked and stuff like that, they were not really selling. So they needed a complete like change, and that's why they took their mask. They took the makeup off on Mask, and they began, and they did that with the Lick It Up album, and I think in '83 and all that. But same with, I guess, with Alice. The albums were not, unfortunately, we're not really selling as they did in the early '70s with Billion Dollar Babies and Welcome to My Nightmare. Those days were gone pretty much, and so Alice kind of like decided, I guess, to adapt a new persona, going forward in the early '80s. Now, again, we talked about it's the Blackout album. He kind of remembers a little bit about this album more than, let's say, Special Forces, Zipper Catch Your Skin, and Dada. So this is kind of like the beginning of the start of the Blackout albums, you would say. So I guess what the big difference was kind of abandoning the classic Alice Cooper character. I don't know what you would call the Welcome to My Nightmare character or the Killer Alice character, the one with the makeup like this with the black eyes and stuff like that. That's when you think of Alice Cooper, this is what you think of. Instead, he went into a totally different direction, and basically this is like I guess you can see this is kind of like a picture what he looked like during this time period. Again, no makeup or anything like that. Well, I guess he would use kind of, especially in the Special Forces era, but completely different. Hair, tied his hair up, and he would, he abandoned most of the theatrics that were famous in his shows. No guillotine or hanging or any execution like that. Basically just doing the songs, just a plain like rock concert. So that's what he did at the time. So again, abandoning the theatrics, and most of the songs, especially in this album, were more serious songs of real life issues instead of talking about like nightmares and stuff like fantasy kind of like fiction stuff. It was more we'll go through the tracks of this album. So there's actually an interview that he did. I forgot. You could probably find it on YouTube. He's on like a podcast with a lady, and they actually talk about this album. And he said something about like sometimes you have to take the audience in the direction you want to go to, or something like that. And sometimes you have to go into a different direction. And that's what's cool about Alice during the early parts of his career. That you could tell his music. He went with what was going on in the music industry at that time. In the early '80s, it was like a lot of like new wave, punk. So he adapted his sound to that style. In the mid '80s, like '85, '86, you got a lot of the hair bands, like Twisted Sister, Poison, Bon Jovi, and stuff like that. So he kind of geared his music to that. So you got Constrictor and Raging Fist and Yell was more like that hair band. And then one more example, like the early 2000s, you have a lot of like the hard rock at the time, and that was like and then we have Brutal Planet and Dragontown. So that's what was cool about Alice is he was able to adapt his sound to what was going on in the music industry. And that's to tell you how talented you are, that you're just not that one, like you only do one kind of style of music. You can do different, and he's proven that throughout his career that he's multi-talented with all. But here we are. This is the back cover of the album, and there's nothing really inside. It's not like a gatefold or anything like that. So this is the album. I got this at a record store, and it looks like in a corner over here. I don't know if you can see this, but it says promotional copy not for sale. So I don't know what that means, but I was like, oh, it's pretty cool. So I wanted to get that. This is the CD version. This is what the CD looks like, and you open it up. It's the same picture in the back. Oh, it's this picture. Same picture. And then nothing really in the booklet. You basically have just the the song, the lyrics of the songs. So there's no other pictures. So it's basically like a kind of like a smaller version of this, which has lyrics on it. So we go into this album. So the songs are, for the record, side 1, Talk Talk, Clones We're All, Pain, Leather Boots, Aspirin Damage. Side 2 is Nuclear Infected, Grim Facts, Model Citizen, Dance Yourself to Death, and Headlines. It was produced by Roy Thomas Baker and engineered by Ian Taylor for the RTB Audiovisual Production, Inc. And again, it came out in 1980, Warner Brothers. So let's talk about the Flush the Fashion tour. Again, stripped down tour, no theatrics, way different compared to this album's tour, the Madhouse Rock tour. Or you might see it on, definitely you can see this on YouTube. You can see it on, they made a DVD out of it. I think it's called The Strange Case of Alice Cooper. But this is like, basically kind of like Welcome to My Nightmare, a lot of theatrics. So again, there's not much information about the tour. There's no like video footage, unlike Special Forces, where you can see kind of the concert. There's like one concert video that you can see that's been replayed, numerous times on YouTube. But there's nothing really, like there's no actual footage. Well, I couldn't find it. I don't know if there's any on YouTube but there's like some pictures, but nothing really. I mean, it's kind of like not. It's weird. It's like almost like Alice was like kind of disappearing. It was like nothing much about this tour. From what I remember, from what I read about the tour, he sang a lot of songs from the album on the tour, And I guess when Alice is kind of like excited for an album, he'll put a lot of songs from that album in the tour. For example, like Welcome to My Nightmare had pretty much all the songs from that album, and for this one it had a lot of songs. And I think the last time he would, I think Trash and Brutal Planet, those tours had a lot of songs from. Sometimes, and usually now, it's like you maybe get like one, if he has a new album out, maybe one or two songs, but usually he sticks with a lot of the old classic songs from the 70s. So I remember so some of the songs on here, unfortunately, a lot of these songs are been kind of like never been played for a very long time. Model Citizen, I think he opened that with that at the concert, and then he used that song again at the Special Forces tour. So a lot of songs from this album were actually also played on the Special Forces tour. Um, Clones We Are All was actually, I mean, there's actually he made like a video, or he was on some kind of show where you could see that on YouTube. Pain was playing at the concert. Um, I think Nuclear Affected and Grimfax. Definitely Grimfax. Dance Yourself to Death. Talk Talk. So he played a lot of songs. I guess because it's kind of trying to rebrand to this new Alice kind of persona. So of course he's going to want to include some of the newer songs to try to get that that character, I guess, over with the audience. And I think at the time you might have confused some of the hardcore Alice Cooper fans. They might not have liked that new direction, and they preferred more of like the Welcome to My Nightmare albums and concerts. But it's unfortunately we talk about how like a lot of these songs have not been played in a very long time live. The only songs that have been played in the last couple of years, Clones have been in new shows. He's played that. Pain, and Grimfax haven't played, but anything other than that, I mean, they have. The last time they've been played, is during the Flush the Fashion tour, and again, that's unfortunate because these are really good songs. And I always wish that Alice would go back to these Blackout albums and kind of maybe pick some of like the best tracks and maybe do kind of like an updated version of it. And I think that would be cool, and kind of like I would love. I don't know if many other fans would like to hear it, but I would love to hear kind of new takes of some of these songs. But yeah, so yeah, this is Alice Cooper, Flush the Fashion. It was. To me, I like this album. If you're collecting started collecting Alice Cooper albums, of course you're gonna probably want to stick with the '70s in the beginning. I say like the top two you probably want to add to your collection. Billion Dollar Babies and Welcome to My Nightmare. Those are probably the two, you know, big albums of his career. And those other ones too, depending. But once you get into the '80s, I highly recommend. I really enjoy this album. It's a quick album. It's not too long. It's definitely something that you should definitely add to your collection. Again, it's not like it's gonna be totally different because you're gonna think of what's going on, because like you're gonna be listening to the '70s stuff and then you're gonna be like going to this one. But I think that his early '80s albums are definitely underrated. There's some really good stuff in there. This is the beginning of it, so I definitely recommend this album to add to your collection. It's again it's an interesting period in his career, and Alice could have continued with the way he was, but he wanted to go into something new, try something new. Can't always do the the old stuff. Always do the same things. And try to adapt to the new music world or whatever was going on at the time. But that's it. I enjoy this album. I prefer Special Forces a little bit more, but I listened to this again the other day and I was like, man, this is a really good album. But thanks for watching.